I hadn't planned on coming home early that Thursday. My calendar, color-coded and crammed with back-to-back meetings, was supposed to keep me locked in my downtown office until dusk. But when the last client canceled, I slipped out before anyone could stop me. The late afternoon light poured across the quiet cul-de-sac as I parked in front of my parents' house, the familiar brick facade still carrying the scent of my teenage years, cut grass, old roses, a trace of my mom's cinnamon candles. I eased open the door and froze. There, in the living room, my parents were knee-deep in cardboard boxes. My favorite books were stacked like rejected memories on the coffee table. My framed college diploma leaned against the sofa, half wrapped in newspaper. Mom's voice floated across the room, soft but brisk. If we get her settled into that studio by Sunday, she'll thank us later. It'll be easier for her. My breath caught. A studio? I gripped the smooth leather strap of my handbag, the way I once clutched my backpack on the first day of middle school. They hadn't heard me yet. The only sound was the faint squeak of packing tape and Dad's low grunt as he lifted another box. They were planning my life. Again, without even asking. And just like that, all the carefully built calm of my grown-up existence cracked. My name is Samantha Hayes, and in that suspended moment, I realized I wasn't just coming home early. I was walking straight back into the battle I thought I'd left behind. I was 21 the night everything cracked. The late summer air in Willow Creek carried that restless, storm-before-rain smell, and I remember tugging my cardigan tighter as I stepped through our front door. My parents' voices, usually a low murmur behind the walls, came sharp and clipped, like glass breaking. "Lila, this is for your own good," my father said when I entered the living room. His arms were crossed, his jaw set. "You can't keep drifting. We found you a small studio near campus. It'll push you to be responsible." The words didn't land like an offer. They dropped like an eviction notice. Boxes, my boxes, were already stacked by the doorway, my life reduced to cardboard and masking tape. The sight sent a tremor through my hands. I swallowed hard. "You packed my things without even asking?" My voice came out smaller than I intended. Mom avoided my eyes, smoothing the hem of her blouse the way she always did when guilt brushed her. "We're helping you move before you get too comfortable here. You need to learn how the world works." Their version of help felt more like exile. I'd just lost a major scholarship, one I hadn't even told them about yet, and was still reeling from the sting of rejection letters. I wanted comfort. Instead, I was being escorted out of my own childhood. Heat prickled the corners of my eyes, but I willed the tears back. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. "I'll figure it out," I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. "But this isn't how you teach someone to stand on her own." Dad exhaled, frustrated. "Someday you'll thank us." Maybe. But that night, gratitude felt like a foreign language. Later, as I hauled the first box to my dented Honda Civic, the porch light flicked on. Across the street, Mrs. Delaney, our elderly neighbor with her perennial rose garden, stepped over with a soft rustle of her housecoat. She pressed something into my palm, a small brass key attached to a faded leather fob. "My sister gave me this when I left home," she whispered. "It's not for a door. It's a reminder. You'll always hold the key to your own life. Don't let anyone else turn it for you." The key warmed against my skin, a quiet pulse of courage. I slid it onto my keyring, its weight strangely comforting. That night, as I drove away from the house that no longer felt like mine, the key caught the streetlight and glimmered, a promise I didn't yet understand, but one I would never forget. I still remember how small my first apartment felt, barely big enough for a bed and a table. Yet it smelled like freedom. The old wood floors creaked when I crossed the room, and the radiator hissed like a temperamental cat, but every sound was my own. No one could tell me where to put my shoes or how long I could leave the lights on. That cramped space became the soil where my future took root. At first, though, the silence was heavy. I worked double shifts at a neighborhood cafe, wiping counters until my wrists ached. Every night, I came home smelling of espresso and bleach, and I drop onto the narrow mattress with my textbooks open beside me, digital marketing guides borrowed from the library. I'd read until my eyelids blurred the words. It wasn't glamorous. My chipped nail polish and secondhand coats didn't exactly scream future entrepreneur. But those long nights were my training ground. I started taking free online courses, learning about branding, social media analytics, and the art of storytelling. That's when I met Vanessa Brooks, the cafe's most loyal customer. Vanessa was the kind of woman who turned heads when she entered a room, not because she was loud, but because she carried herself like someone who had already conquered every challenge thrown her way. One rainy evening, as I refilled her mug, she asked why I always had a marketing textbook propped behind the cash register. When I told her my dream of helping small businesses tell their stories online, she smiled like she recognized a younger version of herself. "Talent's nothing without persistence," she said, sliding me her business card. "Call me if you ever want a real challenge." A week later, I found myself sitting across from her in a sleek co-working space downtown. Vanessa owned a boutique PR agency and offered me an internship, unpaid, of course. It meant even longer days and shorter nights. But I said yes before she finished the sentence. The first few months were brutal. I fetched coffee, updated spreadsheets, and absorbed everything like a sponge. More than once I locked myself in the restroom just to let the tears fall, then powdered my face and stepped back out. Vanessa noticed, but she never coddled me. Instead, she gave me harder tasks. My first big break came when she let me pitch a campaign for a small eco-friendly skincare brand. I poured every ounce of creativity into the proposal, late-night brainstorming sessions fueled by cheap instant noodles and sheer stubbornness. When the client signed on, I felt a rush like nothing else. From there, my confidence grew. I learned to negotiate contracts, to hold my voice steady in boardrooms full of men twice my age. I saved every spare dollar, investing it back into my own fledgling side business, a boutique digital agency I quietly registered under a different name so my parents wouldn't stumble across it on social media. By the time I turned 26, my client list included companies I'd once admired from afar. I'd built something real, something mine, and I'd done it all without a single phone call home to brag or beg. This was the life my parents once insisted I couldn't handle. The life they tried to pack me into a studio apartment for. And I wasn't about to let them know, at least not yet. The next morning, I parked my pearl-white Tesla in front of my parents' suburban house, a picture-perfect colonial with shutters they never quite got around to repainting. The maple trees flanking the driveway were already flecked with late October gold, their leaves scattering like small confessions. I stepped out, heels clicking against the cracked concrete, and inhaled the familiar scent of damp earth and someone else's laundry detergent drifting from a neighbor's dryer. Through the sheer curtains of the living room window, I could see them. My mother, Denise, sat perched on the edge of the sofa, fingers drumming the armrest with restless precision. Dad stood behind her, shoulders slightly hunched, as though bracing for an invisible gust. The same people who had once packed my life into cardboard boxes, without a single text. The same people who believed I'd been cornered into a one-room studio, scraping by on minimum wage. I opened the door without knocking. "Brooklyn," Mom said, springing to her feet. My name came out half question, half apology. "Hi, Mom." "Dad." My voice was even, a deliberate calm that made Mom's eyes narrow, like she was trying to read a language she used to know. Dad cleared his throat. "We, didn't expect you so early. Thought you had work." "I do." I set my leather toad on the console table, the faint scent of my sandalwood hand cream mingling with the aroma of reheated coffee. "But first, I want you both to see something." Their expressions tightened, hesitation, curiosity, the faintest pinch of worry. I led them outside to the driveway, where the Tesla gleamed under the soft morning light. "It's mine," I said, tapping the hood lightly. "Paid in full." Mom blinked. "Yours?"
"Yes."
And that's just the beginning.
I motioned for them to follow me.
They exchanged a glance, then trailed behind as I guided them into the city. 20 minutes of silence broken only by the sound of tires humming over asphalt. I caught Mom's reflection in the side mirror. Lips pursed, eyes flicking from the skyline to me as if counting questions she was too nervous to ask. When we arrived at the converted warehouse loft, I swiped my keycard and pushed open the heavy door. Sunlight spilled across the polished concrete floors. Framed photographs of my first runway campaign lined the exposed brick wall. On the opposite side, a massive walnut desk anchored the open office, where my small but mighty creative agency hummed with quiet energy. My assistant, Grace, glanced up from her laptop. "Morning, B," she said, flashing a knowing smile. Mom took a slow step inside. "This is yours?" "Every square foot," I replied. "The agency, the team, the clients, mine. We design campaigns for brands you see on billboards every day. We've doubled revenue 3 years running." Dad's brows knitted. "But you, when you left, you barely had anything." "How?" "Because you assumed," I interrupted gently, "that packing my things into boxes would shrink me. You thought I'd crumble." I inhaled, steadying my voice. "But leaving forced me to build something on my own. And I did." Silence stretched, thick as honey. Mom's gaze wandered across the room, lingering on the gold-embossed agency logo, the towering shelves of creative awards. Her eyes shimmered. I didn't know," she whispered. "I know you didn't." I softened, letting a breath. I hadn't realized I was holding escape. But I did. I knew what I wanted, even when you didn't believe in me. Dad finally spoke, his voice rough. "Brooklyn, we made mistakes. We thought we were helping." I met his eyes. Helping would have meant asking what I needed. Instead, you packed up my life without me. You taught me that if I wanted respect, I had to claim it myself. Mom reached for my hand, tentative. "And you did." "Yes," I said, squeezing back. "I did." For a heartbeat, the only sound was the low hum of Grace's keyboard and the soft thrum of the city below. In that quiet, the power shifted, settling, finally, into my hands. I let the silence stretch until I could hear the hum of the air conditioner and the faint creak of my leather chair. My parents stood there, side by side, like two school kids caught sneaking candy. For once, they didn't have a single script to lean on. I folded my hands on the desk and looked at them, really looked. My mother's silver hair, usually swept into a neat bun, was fraying at the edges. My father's shoulders, once so square and commanding, sagged beneath his wool coat. "Why?" The single word left my mouth softer than I expected. "Why did you think you had the right to pack my life into boxes again?" My mother cleared her throat. We thought we were helping, sweetheart. That studio was a good price. We didn't know you'd made other plans." I bit back, a bitter laugh. "Other plans? You mean a life that isn't shaped by your fears?" My father shifted. "We wanted you close. We thought you were still," he hesitated. "Struggling." I let the words settle like a weight between us. Struggling. It used to define me, and they'd used it like a prophecy. "You don't get to define me anymore," I said finally. "But you do get a choice if you want to stay in my life." Their eyes snapped to mine. "I'll help you," I continued, "but on my terms." My mother took a small step forward. "Terms?"
"Yes."
"Conditions." I leaned back, feeling the power shift settle fully into the room. "First, therapy. For both of you. I won't keep carrying the scars of your silence and criticism if you're not willing to face them yourselves." They exchanged a glance, half guilty, half relieved. "Second, no more surprise visits. If you want to see me, you call first. Respect my boundaries. That means no more keys to my apartment, no more decisions made behind my back." My father's jaw worked as though he were grinding old pride into dust. "All right," he said finally. "Third," I added, my voice softening, "I want you to find something of your own. A dream. A hobby. Something that isn't micromanaging me. You gave up so much for each other and for me, but somewhere in that sacrifice, you lost yourselves. I need you to find what makes you happy. Not me." Tears welled in my mother's eyes. She nodded slowly, as if the idea of her own joy was something she hadn't dared to consider. "And last," I said, glancing at the small porcelain charm on my desk, the one Aunt Grace had given me years ago. You treat my success with respect. No belittling. No pretending it doesn't matter. I worked for this. You may not have believed I could, but I did. The room went still. My father's voice, rough but sincere, finally broke the quiet. We understand. For the first time in years, I believed him. I walked them to the front door as the late afternoon light spilled across my living room, turning the pale oak floors a soft honey gold. For the first time in years, the silence between us didn't feel like a wall, more like a quiet pause before something new. My dad's hand lingered on the frame. We have a lot to think about, he said, voice unsteady. I know, I answered. I wasn't promising anything, and he understood. Mom reached for my hand. Her grip, once so commanding, now trembled. We didn't really see you all those years. I'm sorry, Harper. Hearing my name in that softened tone brought a lump to my throat. I squeezed her fingers, not as the daughter pleading for approval, but as the woman who no longer needed it. I believe you, I said. And I did. Believing was different from forgetting. They left with slow steps, carrying more than their overnight bags. I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing in the quiet hum of my own space. The scent of fresh coffee drifted from the kitchen, where a single porcelain mug waited, a habit I'd never broken, brewing enough for one. On the bookshelf, the small brass compass Grandma Lillian had given me years ago caught the sunlight. I picked it up, the cool metal warming in my palm. Find your true north, she'd whispered the night I left home. Back then it felt like a riddle. Now it was a map I had already followed. I set the compass back on its stand and glanced at the city's skyline through the tall windows. Cars streamed like ribbons of light below, and somewhere out there, possibilities still stretched wide and unwritten. This wasn't the triumphant finale I once imagined. No dramatic vindication, no cinematic applause. It was quieter, steadier, stronger. I ran a thumb across the edge of the compass and smiled. My true north, I whispered to the empty room, has always been me. And for the first time, the words didn't just sound brave, they felt like home.